Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this, we are trying to comprehensively cover environmental science for civil services and various other examinations. In this, we have our topic nutrient cycling, and in nutrient cycling, especially carbon cycle. So, what is nutrient cycling? Now, nutrient cycling is moving of the nutrients, maybe organic or inorganic, from the physical environment to the living beings and then again back to the environment. Now, in this video, we have especially our focus on the carbon cycle. So, but we'll see first what is the nutrient cycle and what are the various things which are to be considered in the nutrient cycle. Now, nutrient cycle is mainly of two types. First one is gaseous and another one is sedimentary. Now, gaseous cycle includes hydrological cycle, carbon cycle, and nitrogen cycle. Hydrological cycle is nothing but the cycle of water, carbon cycle and nitrogen cycle. And sedimentary cycle considers two nutrients, which is sulfur and phosphorus. Now, in this video, we'll be especially seeing carbon cycle. So, diving into the lecture. Now, what is carbon cycle? Carbon is the minor constituent, but it is very important. Why it is important? Because it is involved in the carbohydrate production. Carbohydrate is the main source of energy. Photosynthesis, it is involved in the photosynthesis, and it also gives rise to the coal, which is the form of energy. It is also present in the diamonds, and it is also a constituent in the DNA. It also absorbs long wave solar radiation, and it works as blanket to earth. It gives protection to the earth. And so let us see more of carbon cycle. All right, now plants. Now consider that there is CO2 in the atmosphere. Now plants inhale CO2. Okay, in the photosynthesis process, they inhale CO2 and then they give out the oxygen. All right, so they exhale O2. Now that is now when photosynthesis, now as CO2, it is converted into CO2 via photosynthesis, it is converted into energy, and that is consumed by the animals and humans. Okay, so now animals and humans, when death and decay of animals or humans take place, it gives rise to the CO2 again, and also the respiration. During the respiration, animals and humans give out the CO2. So that is how it goes back into the atmosphere again. Now, we in this slide are going to see the various sources which give rise to the CO2 emission. Now, the volcanic eruption, which is a natural process, also said to be now when volcanic eruption, it is a natural process. It gives rise to when the volcano emits or erupts, it gives rise to CO2 and some other gases. So, CO2, one source of CO2 is also volcanic eruption. Now, weathering of rocks gives out CO2. Now, how exactly does the weathering of rocks give CO2? Rocks are nothing but calcium carbonate, and calcium, along with the CO2, forms the calcium carbonate. Okay, so whenever the rocks weathering takes place and it is converted into the fine granules, the CO2 is again released back into the atmosphere, and that is how the weathering of rocks contributes to the formation of CO2. Now, similar thing is land tilling. Land tilling is similar to the weathering of rocks. So now, whenever there is agriculture, wherever agriculture takes place, land tilling takes place in those farms. And whenever land tilling takes place, emission of CO2 is there. Now, during the rice cultivation, also CO2 emission takes place. And from the fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels, also the CO2 emission takes place. So, these are the various resources. So these are the various sources which give out the CO2 and are responsible for CO2 emission. Now let us talk about the carbon cycle in ocean, the oceanic carbon cycle. So we know that ocean is known as carbon sink. That is because it absorbs the CO2. It also deflects some of the CO2, but it absorbs most of the CO2. And then when the CO2 is absorbed, that CO2 via by the marine organisms is converted into the calcium carbonate, and that calcium carbonate, when compressed under tremendous pressure of the ocean under the water, that eventually gets converted into limestone. Okay, Now, limestone is nothing but calcium carbonate, and when the weathering of calcium carbonate takes place, CO2 emission takes place. Okay, so due to the absorption of CO2, which the ocean does, it is known as carbon sink, and when it finally emits CO2 due to limestone weathering. So that is how the carbon cycle takes place in the ocean. Okay, now let us talk about some other sources which give rise to the CO2 emission. But these are lesser known sources, but there is a high chance that examiners may frame a questions around these kind of emission sources. So first is animal husbandry. Now the cattle and sheep, raising them is a part of animal husbandry. Now when they go for grazing, the microbes in their stomach, those help the digestion of the coarse plants whichever they eat during the grazing. Okay. So the microbes which help in the digestion of coarse plants, they give out the methane. And methane, as you all know, CH4, it is a source of carbon. Okay. And it also eventually converts into CO2. The other source is construction and mining industry. Now, the breaking down of rocks is an important part in the construction and mining industry. And we previously saw already in this video that the breaking down of rocks or the weathering of rocks gives rise to CO2. Okay. Now, deforestation is not a direct source, but it acts indirectly as a source of CO2 emission because as the deforestation takes place, as the trees reduce, the scope of carbon sink reduces. Carbon sink is where the carbon goes eventually. So the scope of carbon sink it reduces. So these are the various sources, and other one is the marshy fields. Wherever the fields are marshy, for example, in the rice field, during the rice cultivation, the fields are marshy. So in those type of situations, there is high water saturation, and those conditions are conducive for the methane production. Okay, so as and when methane is produced, methane CH4, as and when this is produced, a possible emission of CO2 is there because it when it reacts with oxygen, it can eventually produce CO2. So that is how CO2 emission takes place by the marshy fields as well. All right. So we saw all the sources. Now let's categorize them. Those are mainly categorized between anthropogenic and natural sources. The anthropogenic sources are those which are man-made. Okay. The man-made sources are said to be anthropogenic. So fossil fuel burning, animal husbandry, deep tillage, construction industries are anthropogenic. And the natural sources are weathering, volcanic eruption, and death and decay of microorganisms. Okay, now I have included a previous year question as well. So I request you guys to please pause the video and attempt the question and put its answer in the comment section below. And if you have any doubt, please let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to help. If you like the video, please do hit a thumbs up and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.